for the Newsfirst team. I'm Niresh. Well, this morning we had our new cabinet sworn in, and it was a nice little ceremony, and a lot is expected of those 21 ministers and of course the president himself. So now it's time for them to get down to work, and we have so many issues: the economy, corruption, public transport, education, health. Everything is a mess. We all know it's a mess and it has to be sorted out. And the justice system is one of the pressing items on the agenda, and much has to be done by Parliament and of course by the courts, by the Judicial Services Commission, and of course everybody who is in and around the justice system. And to discuss this, this evening we have with us Mr. Hejaaz Hizbullah, no stranger to our programs, but he's appearing after some time because we've had so many politicians on our programs, and he's not a politician. He is a well-known attorney at law. Welcome and welcome back, Hejaaz.
Thank you, Niresh. Thank you.
So, Hejaaz, a fresh beginning, hopefully, for the nation. Let's not talk about this past 76 years, but what is wrong with our system today, as it is now, and how it has to be fixed. And this is, of course, so in every aspect of the country. We need to fix so many things. But let's talk about justice. Right now in Sri Lanka, the average person just doesn't believe in justice, doesn't believe that he or she can get justice from this entire system. And in most cases, it is true. Justice simply doesn't exist in Sri Lanka except for a very rare case. Now, how do we fix this, Hejaaz? Where do you start?
But why do you want to? But why are you interested in justice, Niresh? And that's, I think, that has been the question, because we as a country have not been interested in justice. In fact, we've been a country that has thrived on injustice, and that has been okay with injustice. So I'll give you a few examples. When a very popular president gets judgments, plays around with the Supreme Court, nobody is bothered about it because they're happy. Well, that's our president, he's entitled to do that. Recently we had the case of Dr. Shafi, when he was arrested and when he was locked up, and when all that was going on, the drama.
We love drama. That's another aspect.
Yeah. So
too much drama in our lives.
Who spoke about justice then? Who spoke about justice then? We've had PTA detainees languishing in prison for a very, very long time. Who's talking about justice then? So recently when we had the student union leaders being locked up under the PTA, of course there was much more concern, but there was also people saying, no, they deserve it, they need to be there. So part of the problem has also been our notion of justice and injustice, and also our willingness and readiness to engage with that process.
But Hejaaz, you're talking about the country as a whole.
As a whole, yeah.
The people as a whole. But shouldn't governments and statesmen and judges and all those people who are in the system, shouldn't they be setting the bar, the standard, and the people should follow that standard, rather than looking at the people and saying, well, the people are not interested in justice, and the politicians will fiddle around with it anyway, so let's let it go as it is. Because in the end, we saw what happened. Our entire economic breakdown came with this. It was a result of this. You couldn't go to court. You couldn't. I mean, when President Gotabaya Rajapaksa banned chemical fertilizer, there wasn't a hum. although every farmer in this country knew what was going to happen. Anyone who has planted even a chili plant in his life knows that you can't just take away the nourishment of the plant. So we knew that it was the beginning of the end right then and there. But nobody.
For Gotabaya at least.
Well, it was for the country. We've
Yes.
been suffering
Yes,
for years
yes.
since that. And of course, we couldn't predict that it would be the beginning of the end for President Gotabaya at the time. But the whole point is that people are supposed to be able to look to the justice system to prevent things like this from happening.
Certainly, and so taking the cue from you, Niresh, yes, there is a serious problem in our justice system. There's a massive backlog, and there's a huge delay in having your case heard and resolved and concluded. Part of the reason has been we have not invested enough money in our judicial system, in our legal system. Also, we do not train our lawyers well enough, right? So that's another thing that we need to focus on. That because the legal system is run by lawyers, and so the lawyers also need to be legal training has to be there has to be much more attention paid to the quality of the people who come out of our law schools and who become lawyers and the judges and so on and so forth. The infrastructure has not enough money has been spent on the infrastructure. Digitalization has not happened. So there are lots of issues that I think we have a new Justice Minister, Ms. Arsan, a lawyer who practiced actively in the system, so he knows how the system works. So there's a lot that we need to do. And also certain governmental institutions that contribute to or participate in the legal justice system also need substantial reform.
Well, let's take one of those institutions, the Attorney General's Department. And I'm not going to point fingers at any particular Attorney General or lawyers within the AG's department. But the problem is that the AG's department doesn't seem to put its foot down and tell governments and the police, the CID and so on, when a case is simply not there. It's not strong enough. There's insufficient evidence, but they'll go ahead and file charges and the case is heard, and it takes years. And at the same time, the AG's department complains that it lacks resources, but its resources are spent on all this nonsense. I mean, we had the case of a comedian who was locked up for a joke, and that turned the whole country into a joke because we became a country without a sense of humor, and that's really sad. And then that comedian was locked up under the ICCPR Act, which is a draconian act. That's meant for, if you want to start a religious war, you can get locked up under that, not for cracking a joke. And then after nearly a year, the AG's department drops the charges. So if they knew that the charges wouldn't stick 11 months down the road, why didn't they know that from day one? Why didn't they tell the powers that be, this is not a crime under this act? I mean, we all saw it. We as journalists, we said, what in the world? It's a joke, right?
Thing is, Niresh, okay, so the AG's department handles a large number of cases. So there is, I would concede to some extent that there is a scarcity of resources, and that they do struggle to meet the workload. But of course, I think there also needs to be some sort of reflection on how the AG's department also works, and how productive they are and how productive each state council is. So that kind of analysis is also important. So quite apart from that, in the high-profile cases, now Natasha's, as you said, is a high-profile case. In high-profile cases, we do see the Attorney General flogging a dead horse, or at least prolonging a process which someone might say is dead from the beginning. And that's because the AG has lost the culture of independence and the ability and the strength to make a strong decision and to stick to that. And that kind of Attorney General's department and that kind of Attorney General is a matter of history. But we had that in the past. We don't have that now. Part of the reason was in the last few years, I think maybe in around after 2010, the Attorney General's department came under the President's office and then became very close to the executive and part of the executive, and stopped functioning like a public service department. The Attorney Generals, there were few Attorney Generals who came from outside, who were appointed, like I think Mr. Mohan Piris was not from the original cadre. So we've had those developments that have completely changed the culture in the Attorney General's department. So that, I think, is part of the contributing factor that is playing a role there. Of course, we have a new government, a new president, a new justice minister, and I'm sure they are not interested in using the Attorney General to do their legwork or do their bidding, and that they'll give that amount of independence for the Attorney General to make decisions. And that's when you're going to see the type of decisions that you're talking about, where they'll be able to tell the CID, well, no, there is no case, just forget about it. They don't do that because the AG's department officials are worried about the consequences.
But they're playing with people's lives, Hejaaz. If the Attorney General's department, the lawyers there, they know there is no case, and they go ahead with the case, knowing very well that this won't stick. That to me is almost criminal, isn't it?
That is also possible. I mean, that way of looking at it is also possible. You could also, the Attorney General Attorney General does not make these decisions alone. They also do it they decide this based on information that's fed to them by the CID and the other government, and the police and the other government institutions. So it depends on what they've been told, that there is a case or there is no case. Sometimes it could very well be that it's only a few days in trial that the state councils also realize, no, this is not sticking.
Well, that's very sad.
That is sad.
Of course, we know the CID has been politicized in the past. So that's a basket case that needs to be revamped. Hopefully, it will get done.
So the whole
system
comes out into this: the how the legal system has been weaponized, and how the act of arrest, the act of detention, the act of prosecution, all of that is being used for a political purpose or some other purpose.
Yeah, but Hejaaz, now you use the word weaponized, but that is exactly what dictatorships do. I mean, Nazi Germany did that. You look at any kind of authoritarian regime, this is what they do. They pass laws which are advantageous to that particular ruling party, and then they weaponize those laws, and they make sure that the departments such as the CID, the AGs and so on, that they will dance to the tunes.
Isn't that what has been happening in Sri Lanka?
Exactly.
That's what exactly. And then you have the other side of it, is that once the government changes, all the cases are withdrawn,
which is quite silly.
So it's like a game. Yes. So every time there's a new government, there's a whole spate of new prosecutions and several prosecutions being withdrawn. It's a silly thing. Criminal lawyers enjoy this, or at least or don't enjoy. If their client's case is withdrawn, well, they don't enjoy. But if there's a new case filed, then of course they get a new set of instructions. They enjoy it. But that's the problem here. That's the problem. It's how these institutions, and that's why I said at the beginning, Niresh, why are you interested in justice? Because some people do thrive on the injustice.
Far too many people
thrive on the injustice. So it's the system that has been sort of geared and formed and shaped in a way that it can deliver the results that they want, where they can prosecute whoever they want, they can detain and blah blah blah. And that is why that is why governments don't invest a lot on courts and training lawyers and training judges and training police officers, because we don't want that.
But again, that lack of resources, lack of investment in infrastructure, in training, this is the excuse we hear every time. We've heard it for decades. And governments, parties come to power, and then they make that excuse, and they continue making the excuse, and then you wonder, well, what did the government do at all, and what they have done is weaponize laws. Now, we still have the PTA, the Prevention of Terrorism Act of 1979, which was supposed to be a temporary
provision.
That's quite ridiculous. It's as draconian as you can get, you can basically, it's like locking a person up and throwing away the key. That's basically what it is. And it's still there. And of course, the present ruling party has promised to get rid of it. And now that they have the majority, you don't even need two-thirds. You just need a simple majority. So there is absolutely no reason to keep that. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are so many other laws which can be used, whether it's something to do with just an ordinary crime or something to do with terrorism. You can use so many other laws.
Yeah. Yes. I don't think anyone who's coming on to the debate about the PTA is saying that no country should have some sort of legal regime to deal with emergencies, especially where the emergency is in the form of what we might call a terrorist threat, an organized group that is working towards attacking the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of the country for whatever reason, and it's violent. The country would need some sort of legal regime, but those legal regimes need to meet international standards and also must be strictly on necessity basis. The problem with the PTA is that it's a standard law in our law books, used across the board for anybody, and that has been the problem in cases where it's clearly it's been abused. So we do hope that the new government will have that repealing the PTA would be part of its legislative program.
And again, the PTA has been one of those laws which has been heavily weaponized. You don't even have to use it. The simple threat of it being there is enough.
Yes.
On some of the occasions when I have had to go to the CID, CID officers very clearly told me, okay, we could use the PTA. So the threat is implied, and even though we know we've done nothing wrong, the thought of spending months in remand,
years,
months or years,
right?
Yes, because if it's the normal law, then you get, the judges have the discretion, but PTA, the judges have very little discretion. So you're basically putting the law in the hands of the executives, the politicians. So this is all wrong.
This
So,
is wrong.
yeah.
And part of the confidence with which a police officer is able to talk to you like that is also part of the because there is absolute impunity enjoyed by them, and there's absolute zero accountability for police excesses and the police wrongdoing with regard to the PTA. Now, we've had the PTA for 40 years. So many people have been arrested, so many people have left, so many innocent people have spent years in custody and gone home. Does anybody find out, okay, who are those police officers, what did they do? Let's take Dr. Shafi's case. Dr. Shafi is home. Did any one of those police officers suffer consequences? In fact, they all got promotions. So does anybody talk about that? Has anybody gone into and said, okay, these are the police officers who did this on this case and who initiated this, the DIG, Kurunagala and SSP and all of that. What happened to them? They all got promotions. Does anybody go back and say, look, you guys framed this man innocently, and that doesn't happen?
So I mean,
including the journalists, not even an apology.
In fact, you are correct. There were many journalists who also jumped on the bandwagon. Fortunately, we at Newsfirst don't jump on bandwagons like that. But it's not just the Dr. Shafi case. There are so many cases, hundreds of cases like that, where police simply get away and they even get promoted. But now this is the system change that we need to demand. The police has to be revamped, where when a police officer breaks the law, that police officer has to answer for it, not get promoted. And so who's going to do that?
Independence of all these institutions. Independent Public Service Commission, an independent police commission, and those commissions being allowed to perform their functions. We need to put the right people into those, people with some sort of real integrity, experience, knowledge, without leanings and biases and sort of obligations to anybody. And they need to come into those institutions, and they need to start then functioning independently. That's number one. The Human Rights Commission. So all these commissions that we have need to start functioning with independence, and then we will see the change that we're talking about. And we had some good examples. The Deshabandhu Tenakon, the Constitutional Council, members of the Constitutional Council showing some independence and saying that, well, we don't want to ratify that particular decision because there were lots of allegations against him. Whether those allegations are true or false or whatever, there were allegations, and it was not a good idea to have someone like him functioning in that high position of Inspector General of Police. And the Supreme Court also was moved in on the matter and gave a stay order. So these institutions, I think, and that's the thing that we're hoping. We don't need to do a lot.
Well, it's all about standards, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, in the case of that former IGP, I mean, was it seemed like some of the politicians were out of their mind to put him up there. I mean, whether he's guilty or not is besides the point. The very fact that there was such a cloud of allegations meant that you can't tarnish that post, that position, by having a person with such allegations in it. I mean, if he can clear the allegations, then certainly he could come back. But why even consider someone like that? So this is, it's all about standards, isn't it?
Yes, it's all about standards, and talking about standards, we all saw that photograph of that particular officer standing at Golface with certain government ministers whilst a group of assailants marched into or ran into and went on a rampage on Gotago, Gama and Daragale. And then there was a police. I mean, under the law, if he was standing there and he could see some civilians getting assaulted mercilessly, he should be giving orders to stop the assault, not standing with the minister and cracking a joke and having a laugh. But that's how our society. Those were the standards.
But then again, it comes.
But fortunately, we have progressed, I suppose.
Well, is it too little, too late? Because a lot of damage was done, and that's the other thing. It seems to take us months and years to come to a rational decision, which in 5 seconds you can see it. I mean, you look at the video and you see it, or you read a newspaper and you see what a case is, and it's very clear, right? But then we seem to go in the wrong direction, and years later, okay, we turn back. So it's like there's a fork in the road. You take the wrong one, you know you've taken the wrong route, and you keep going for 100 kilometers, and then you turn around and come back. So what's the point?
Yes, I mean that has been the tragedy of our country. Lots of reasons and explanations can be given. I think
none of which hold water.
Huh?
None of which hold water.
None of which hold water. None of which hold water. These are just excuses.
Yes.
These are just
bad excuses.
Yeah, bad excuses. But again, going back to my original answer, there is a culture of not being keen on doing the right thing.
Well, it's time to break that culture.
Yes.
And hold that thought, Hejaaz, because we are going in for a short commercial break. We are with Attorney at Law Hejaaz Hizbullah. We'll be right back.
A trusted place for your fixed deposit. Valuable FD, a symbol of stability.
ජනප්‍රිය ගායන ශිල්පී මදුෂාන් නානායක්කාරගේ නවතම ගීතය නොදැනීම Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube ඇතුළු ඔබගේ ප්‍රියතම සංගීත සේවාවන් හරහා රස විඳින්න.
Entertainments.
And we're back. You're with Face to Face, and we are with Attorney at Law Hejaaz Hizbullah. So, Hejaaz, we were talking about the culture change that we need, and we need it in every aspect of life in this country. It doesn't matter whether you're working in the Ministry of Ports and Shipping, or you may be a farmer somewhere, but all of us have to change this culture. But there are certain things which just stand out, it's common sense, and we don't seem to do this. We don't seem to take the right decision. Why is that? What is it in our culture that makes us believe that doing the wrong thing is okay?
I don't know.
I mean, I'm sure a psychologist or a psychiatrist would have a field day
answering that question. But I think it's a lot to do with education and how we educate the young about these concepts. I'll just share something that's going on right now. We have the Guantanamo Bay trials, where those within inwards accused of the 9/11 attacks have been put to trial, I think after 20 odd years of custody and prolonged detention, torture, etc. But in that whole process, we've had members of the prison service, the US Army and the Navy, etc., acting as whistleblowers and coming out and talking about what has gone on to those people who were locked up in Guantanamo Bay. And that has been part of the reason why we know the truth about the waterboarding and everything that happened. So what is it that makes those people be ready and willing to do the right thing.
Doing the right thing, exactly.
To be the whistleblower.
Yes.
But we don't see it here. And I do not know. But I think it's a lot to do with our sense of this is our nation and our sense of education. I think part of the problem is that we don't have a sense of this is my country. And so I must do this for my country. That kind of notion is not there. And so even the concept of country is weaponized.
So,
right? So
it's sort of like it's none of my business. And the fate of the country is none of my business. It's something like that, isn't it? I think the whole society.
Yeah, anyway, it's a tough question you asked me. But I think it's also to do with the idea that my country will benefit with this particular wrongdoing, and therefore let's do it. That so going back to our favorite topic, the PTA.
Yes.
The fact that people are arrested, there's so much injustice happening, but then we've got to do it to protect our country. That's what I'm saying.
Even though we know it's wrong.
And even though we know it's wrong.
That's a terrible position to be in.
That was the same case with the Shafi case. Shafi's done something against our Rata Jatiya, Agama. And so we need to do something about it. So yeah, Shafi needs to face consequences, or at least the Shafi case is a good way to promote a political agenda that will protect our Rata Jatiya, Agama.
Well, Rata, I certainly agree with, but the Jatiya Agama bit is, well, your religion is your own. It's between you and your God or gods. It's got nothing to do with the government or the rest of society or even your next door neighbor. As long as you don't disturb your neighbor with some loud music or incantations or whatever. Now let's look at the whistleblowers. That's one thing that you mentioned. In Sri Lanka, if you report, if you complain, if you call the emergency number, you're taking a risk, aren't you? Because you're going to get called in. You will have to go to the police station. The perpetrators are there. They see who you are. They'll be sending visitors to your home, making threatening calls, doing all of that, and you're simply not protected, even though there is a law to protect, isn't there?
There is a law and there is an authority that has been set up. I am not entirely clear as to how much of work they've done. What I do know is they've started working. But
there is no public awareness of this. There's no faith that the public has that they can now, okay, there is a law, there is an authority, we can now complain, nothing will happen to us.
No,
that's not the situation.
That's not the situation. But let's hope that once the authority gets its act going and they start working proper, then we will see something going on. Of course, Nilesh, all these authorities were set up just before the economic meltdown and all those budget cuts and the austerity measures that we had to all go through. So I think most of these institutions were struggling to get anything going. But I think if we do, so that's part of the economic, I mean, if we have enough money in hand, then maybe these are luxuries that the government can then start spending on, like where you will be able to go to this authority and be a whistleblower, give confidential information about a very important, powerful person, and also be protected adequately.
Hejaaz, we're coming back to the lack of money, lack of resources issue, which I frankly don't believe. We are a nation which is 30 trillion rupees in debt. 30 trillion. So our political leaders thought nothing of busting 30 trillion rupees, which we don't have. That's borrowed money, which we will probably never be able to pay back. But if you say, well, the police need 100 million to do something, there's no money for it. The Aegis department needs 50 million, there's no money for it. So this is ridiculous. It's not a lack of money. If you can borrow 30 trillion for God knows what, certainly you can find funding either from government revenue or from international.
I agree with you, Nilesh.
You can
I entirely agree with you. And let's hope that happens. And for that, again, we need to have a public opinion needs to be strong on that sentiment, and we need to be talking about that and saying that, well, we need to spend more on our legal justice system and on these processes. I mean, of course, we had a massive movement to increase the spending on education, and the academics went on a nationwide march. Well, of course, the government at that time didn't take those things, and I don't think there was anything much in terms of improvement. But of course, that movement also, I think, can be seen in today's change in government and how academics are playing a much more enhanced role in the national politics. But anyway, we need to keep talking about these things, and we need to increase public awareness and sentiment and showing how these are important. And I think the Aragalaya also drew our attention to how human rights is also human rights, and these concepts of justice and arrest and all that are connected to our economic well-being. Because part of the reasons when the government was borrowing this 33 trillion US dollars and spending, the people who were talking about it were either locked up, or people who had the information about it were not ready to talk about it. The people who had information about the corruption were not ready. So, moment the people and the government see that these institutions, that our justice institutions, are also connected to our financial institutions and our financial well-being, how well the health procurements are, and all that. I mean, when we see that this is the sort of the conduit through which we are able to poke holes in and discover what's happening in those important institutions, and to hold those people accountable, then we are going to be starting to spend more money and pay more attention and talk about it, etc. So I think that's the way that we need to move forward.
But where does it start? Does it start with the government taking action? Because now we're back to the culture change, and the Aragalaya, the mass movement, what it demanded was system change, but what the people meant was change the government, change the president, without realizing that the system change is everybody. 22 million people need to change the way they're doing it. But the general population is not going to change unless it has to, because they are in a comfort zone. And now they've got their petrol and their diesel, and now they've got a new president, a new parliament, a new cabinet. They are in a comfort zone. They are not going to look at their own behavior and say, no, we have to change this. So does it have to now start from the government saying this is how it needs to be done?
I think the people have given a good indication to the government on the system change, and I think people and the overwhelming mandate from the north, from the east, from the south, from the west and the central hills that the government got, where the NPP candidates in certain strongholds of other parties were able to come through resounding victories and winning electorates in the north, shows that the people are now ready for it, or at least they want it. So I think the government must take that initiative and take the baton forward. So certainly the government has an important role to play. I'm very happy with the appointment of the Justice Minister, Ms. Harsha Nanayakara, who knows quite apart. I mean, of course, this is the first time he's holding cabinet portfolio, obviously, but he knows what he's talking about. At least being a practicing lawyer, in the very sense of the word practicing, has been in and out of court, and daily we've seen him in Hull stuff. So certainly we can see a positive, hopefully, that they at least they know the problem.
Now, speaking of problems, do you sometimes get the feeling that we tend to exaggerate our problems, that we make too much of it when the solutions are actually quite simple? For example, there was a judgment by the Supreme Court of India a few months ago in response to allegations of torture in police stations. The Supreme Court simply said, well, the order is that all police stations have to have CCTVs installed. And that is actually going on now. It's not fully implemented, but it is happening. So it's very simple, isn't it? They didn't try to change the behavior of the police. They simply said, somebody is going to be watching. So then the behavior changes automatically. So we are next door to India, very close, but we don't even think about that kind of thing. We don't look at those examples. We tend to overcomplicate things and try to reinvent the wheel here.
Maybe we do those things. Maybe we do. I mean, I'm at a loss to say whether we do complicate things or whether we do not complicate things. But
we don't take the simple steps which can be taken, which don't require massive resources.
yeah.
I'll give you another example. A few days ago.
But I'll give you one another. I'll give you another example. Like, of course, we didn't spiral like Bangladesh. Also, we didn't collapse like Bangladesh. Also, so and we have transitioned quite peacefully.
Thank goodness for that. Yes.
To some real change, and we must thank the NPP also for that. SJB also for that. I mean, for being there in the political arena and battling this issue out and not allowing for others to hijack the change, and for participating in the process. So, of course, India and Sri Lanka are two different countries, and we have a completely different political history. And history of activism and approaches, and also the Indian Supreme Court has a different history and a different approach. The Sri Lankan Supreme Court also has a different history, and also the Indian Supreme Court functions in a prime ministerial setup of a Westminster model, whereas our Supreme Court functions under the 1978 Constitution, under the executive.
We're back to
there is some
presidency.
Yeah, there is a lot of dynamic there.
Right.
So the Indian Supreme Court ordering to order CCTV. In Sri Lankan Supreme Court ordered to have the elections. That did not happen. Then they ordered to have the visa, the VFS issue. That did not happen. But then, of course, the opposition MPs went to court, and now the control of immigration has been charged for contempt, and he's in remand custody. So there's a bit of a dynamic. So how the executive also responds to the Supreme Court will also influence how the Supreme Court also talks to the country and to the executive.
Well, the way the last government responded to the Supreme Court was atrocious.
But the Supreme Court also didn't back off. I mean, they also stood their ground, and they
shouldn't back off. You know, there's no way that they can, because after all, they are upholding the very tenets of justice. So, you know, it takes a very foolish politician to take on the Supreme Court, I would think. And hopefully there will be
Particularly when you didn't appoint the judges.
well, we're not going to get into fixing the judges, because I think our Supreme Court is very impartial in that respect.
Yes.
Haven't had any allegations.
Well, all again, constitutional reform and the Constitutional Council, that has really helped with the independence of the judiciary aspect of it.
That's true. Now, if you were advising the new Minister of Justice on the various aspects that have to be changed, what kind of time frame?
Very tough questions.
What
Dinesh.
kind of time frame? Well, we have a new government, and they came in holding themselves to a very high standard, and that's what the people voted for. 62%, unprecedented. People expect great things, so it's up to us on shows such as this to raise the bar,
talk about this
raise the bar ourselves. We shouldn't be complacent with anything less, because that is what is expected of us as well. So basically,
what would I advise him?
What is the time frame
to do what?
To improve this, to sort it out? Are we talking about 5 years, or can something be done within a year?
One of the problems we've had with law reform has been inadequate consultation. So I certainly would not advise anything happening in a hurry. But there are certain things that we can do. For example, abolishing the executive presidency, electoral reform, because it has been a talk for a long time, and some of the part of the problems that we have identified with our political culture and the corruption has been rooted in or focused on, and has been found to be rooted in the proportional representative system that we had and the battle for preferences. So so these are things that I think a government that it's committed can get done maybe within 9 to 12 months. They can get all these things done. A lot of these things are already spoken about, and these are, a lot of the discussions and the consultations have already happened, and it's there. Just have to take it. In fact, these are the people who are participating in those debates.
Absolutely.
Right? These are the people. So I was just going through some of those old documents, and we have the same names sitting in various important persons in government now, who have also been the petitioners who filed this case and that case, and who fought this issue and that issue, and etc. So they know what these issues are.
And there is a general consensus.
There is a general consensus. A lot of these issues. So, but certainly 1 to 2 years is, I think, a good time for a lot of these essential, much agreed to legal reform taking place.
Yes, because when you say much agreed to, obviously no one has to tell this government that the PTA needs to go, that the executive presidency needs to go, and various other reforms which are required, that more training has to be given to the AG's department, more resources. It's the same for the CID and the police, and so on and so forth. There's a consensus on all that, so that needs to go forward. But sometimes we lack that common sense to take that next step, don't we?
Yes, and I hope the new government will, which looks promising. That has banked itself on and put itself forward as a government of intellectuals and academics and professionals, won't fall for that same folly, and that they will be the government that actually makes a difference.
Now, let's talk a little bit about one of these much hyped operations which took place by the police during the last regime, this Operation Yuktiya. which was supposed to be a crackdown on drugs, on narcotics. But instead, what we found, of course, perhaps a small dent may have been made on the drug mafia, but overwhelmingly it seemed to be that innocent people were being arrested and sometimes charged. And many people were arrested and just, released the next morning, which seems quite strange as well, because the press release we got from the police on a daily basis said so many were arrested and then so many were charged. So, it was like 90% were sent home. So what's going on here? And we have some very tough laws on narcotics. So isn't this rather silly? Because it seemed to be a political gambit.
The Yukti operation, Niresh, is another example of how our justice system has gone wrong. Narcotics, our battle against dangerous drugs is an important battle. As a society, we need to fight that. But unfortunately, the battle has given a lot of power to the police. And today we have a situation where you can face the death penalty and be convicted for the death penalty on the evidence of 3 to 4 police officers only. 3 to 4 police officers could come and give evidence against you, and you will be locked up, and you will face the death penalty for trafficking narcotics. So it's extremely dangerous. The bail provisions have also been, I think, very strict. It's very difficult to get bail. I think it's slightly lenient than PTA, but not up to the PTA standard, but slightly lower than that. But it's tough. So this obviously has given the police a lot of freedom and power to maneuver and to move. And I myself am doing 2 cases, one in the Supreme Court and one in the Court of Appeal, related to Yukti arrest. And I can say very clearly that these are completely innocent people who were just one for being at the wrong place at the wrong time, and the other because he got into an argument with a police officer. Simply because he got into an argument with a police officer, he was arrested. And then the police easily planted, and it's so easy. And so Yukti is another example of how it was done. And again, it was done at a time when the the chief operating officer of Yukti himself was struggling to keep his job in his position in the police force stable. So clearly showing how these things are used.
Now, another aspect that strikes me, Hejaaz, is that our police force, a police department, hardly ever seems to take disciplinary action against errant officers. You do have a certain number of cases, but you hardly ever hear that this officer was sacked, was terminated after inquiry, of course. You hardly ever hear that. Whereas now, when you have, say, high-profile cases in the United States, where the police are certainly no angels there, and you get a lot of shootings of ordinary people, but invariably those police officers do get terminated. The city council, which runs the police, will take the decision and terminate. But you don't have that culture here. Instead, we do suspend officers. There is something called a punishment transfer, where the officer is simply sent to a less important police station, but then he can continue to terrorize the people in that area. So isn't this again a system which needs to change?
Yes, I think again it's something very again something to do with 2 things: independence and the culture. once the police commission starts functioning independent, once it's an independent police commission that's able to function independently, then certainly they are going to be able to look into these matters and to the discipline control of police officers. And secondly, the culture of being police officers being held accountable. We do not see that. Superior officers do not feel it is their responsibility to ensure that those junior officers are held accountable. That does not happen. That I think is the reason why. I mean, there's so many cases of wrongdoing on the part of the police, where or police officers, nothing happens. I'll give you one example that is there is the Valikada riots.
Absolutely.
No one convicted.
Another horrific case.
No
High
one
profile.
convicted. Nobody can. So what happened there? So nobody died. Who did it? Nobody knows.
Well, the new Minister of Justice certainly has his work cut out for him, and of course we will be giving our 2 cents worth of advice as well. I'm afraid we are out of time. Mr. Hejaaz Hizbullah, Attorney at Law, thank you very much for coming
Thank
in.
you, Nilesh.
And we hope to have you more frequently on our program.
Looking
And
forward
thank
to
you to you at home for watching. Don't go away because the news is coming up next. Have a good evening.